Hello, everyone. Well, thank you all for joining today. We are very excited to have everyone here today as we talk about reserve studies, best practices, and how to keep your community successfully funded. So I will introduce today's speakers. We are pleased to have with us Sean Kargari of Association Reserves. Sean joined Association Reserves in 2003 after graduating from Cal State Northridge. He has since completed over 1,800 reserve studies for a wide range of properties, including condominiums, luxury timeshare resorts, high rises, schools, libraries, public municipal facilities, and religious facilities. For his expertise, he earned the CAI Community Association Institute's Reserve Specialist designation, and he has the distinction of being RS number 115. His reserve study experience includes projects across the lower 48 states and internationally in Spain, the UK, France, Puerto Rico, Mexico, Thailand, Macau, and Dubai. We are also pleased to introduce our founder and CEO, Neda Nehouray. Neda Nehouray is the founder and CEO of HOA Organizers, an award-winning accredited association community management company serving communities throughout California and Washington state. A past president of the CAI Greater Los Angeles chapter, Neda is a frequent speaker at industry events nationwide and chairs multiple CAI chapter committees. She is also the creator of the ABCs of HOAs, a premier annual educational event for volunteer board members that draws hundreds of attendees each year, taking place this year on December 6th in Burbank. So visit our website for more information on that. With that, I will turn the space over to Neda and Sean.
Matt, thank you so much. And thank you everybody for joining us today. As you know, we're in the heart of budget season for most associations. Not everybody is on a calendar fiscal year, but many of us are working on our budgets. We're working on getting them approved and actively sending them out, our budget disclosure packages, to our memberships now. So many board members are reviewing reserve studies and interpreting those reserve studies to help with the budget process. But we want to make sure that we help you in terms of being able to really understand the reserve study, understand how to read it, how to interpret it, how to use it in order to project for your upcoming fiscal year, but also for future years. So Sean is our expert, and we've worked with Sean in Association Reserves for many, many years. And Sean is going to be sharing his screen and providing us with some sample reserve studies that we can go through. I encourage all of you to use the Q&A or the chat box feature. If you have a question that comes up in the middle, I will field those questions and make sure to jump in and ask Sean to answer those questions throughout the webinar. But I look forward to hearing from you, Sean. So I will welcome or give you the floor now.
Neda and Matt, thank you so much for that warm welcome and introduction. And hello to everyone out there. Yes, as Neda said, we are in the midst of budget season for a lot of communities. I'm sure the reserve study is a hot topic at your monthly meeting in October. So let's jump into it. I hope you guys enjoy my photography here. This is a study I worked on recently. You'll note I marked out the community name for, protect their information. But of course, the reserve study is always prepared during your current year for the upcoming fiscal year. So most of you are looking at 2026 reserve study updates right now. You want to obtain this update months in advance. You should start this process no later than 6 months before the start of your upcoming fiscal year. You want to receive the draft ideally 4 to 8 weeks before your annual budget meeting. The sooner you start, the more time you have to review this document. This should not be an unveiling ceremony at your annual budget meeting. Please, don't do that. Plan ahead, because if you have some serious questions about your reserve study, you won't have time really to go back to your reserve specialists, especially at your meeting. You have to make a decision then. So what do we as reserve specialists see on our end, and how are we formulating the findings. There's a lot of details in reserve studies. This particular one is 70 pages long. We don't expect every board member to sit down and go through every single page line by line. My hope today is to pinpoint the key points of information that are critical to your reserve study update versus the supporting information. There's a lot of redundancies, different ways to show the same information. So I want to help you guys navigate your reserve studies more effectively. So this is a real world example here. We got a fresh new reserve study right out of the oven. The first thing everyone's eyes are naturally going to gravitate towards are your percent funded and the recommended reserve contribution for the upcoming fiscal year. This is very natural. When I open up my tax return, I want to know, do I owe or am I getting a refund? This is very critical information. Percent funded is a lot more important and telling than your reserve fund balance. The reason being, 340, almost $341,000 sounds like a good sum of money. It truly is. But when we're talking about a community, it can mean that you are, doing just fine. You're in great shape, or you are dramatically underfunded. So, there's no cash basis. There's no cash minimum required. We don't just look at your reserves and see, 500,000 and say, oh, great. This will be a really smooth funding plan. It really, what really matters is your fully funded reserve balance, and I'll get into more details on how that is calculated. But we divide that by your current reserve fund balance to arrive at your percent funded. And percent funded is crucial because what it really boils down to is the health of your reserves, and will you be able to fund your near-term and long-term reserve projects. If you are below 30% funded, you are carrying an extremely high risk of having to rely on special assessments to fund your near-term projects. And special assessments, as Neda and a lot of you board members know, they can cause a lot of trouble with associations because beyond, if it's more than 5% of the annual budget's value, then the members, the owners have control and they have to approve it. So special assessments naturally cause project delays and could result in the building infrastructure and important key elements being neglected for many years, and that can cause more damage. So that's why being 30% funded or less is a weak, very shaky reserve position. If you are 30 to 70% funded, this is considered to be in a strong reserve position. The example we had up there at 37%. So they do have a modest risk of special assessments. Around 20% is where they're hovering. If you can get to 70% funded or higher, you can see why that is a strong reserve position. You do not have to be 100% funded to have healthy reserves. You don't have to be perfect, basically.
Now,
Um,
I have a quick question for you,
yes.
because this is a common question that we get from our clients, where wherever they fall in this range, their question to us or comment is, well, are there any associations that are actually 100% funded, and what is the average? It's almost like they want to kind of know where they fall in relation to other associations. So what do you typically see as the average?
Good. So the myth is that nobody is in a strong position or 100%, and that's untrue. Approximately a fifth or 20% of all communities are in a strong position
In
uh,
California?
nationally.
Okay.
So
I was
yeah,
gonna
we
say.
do need to start tracking it more for California.
Right.
And if you throw in the portion of the fair range, if the 50 to 60%, that's when climbing above 50% or 60%, you're getting into pretty healthy um, range, territory. I had my annual physical, and a lot of my results are kind of in this range. So it could be better, but it's not terrible. If you throw them in, you know, the vast majority, or I would say the majority of communities do have healthy or strong reserves. About 35% are in the danger zone. And so it's important to start taking that serious. If you are getting this warning sign, if you are seeing that 30 or 37% funded, just know that, you know, it's going to be a gradual process. Me as a reserve specialist, you know, I live in the real world. I'm not giving you a funding plan that demands that you get to 100% funded by 2027. I'm going to give you, you know, the least painful option of gradually building up your reserves and being able to complete your projects on time. It's important to note that if you can get from 30% up to 40% funded, you've cut your risk of special assessment in half. So we're going to, you know, hopefully lead you in the right direction. But first, foremost, the board needs to understand, you know, what's really behind these numbers. There's a lot of course, skepticism or why am I funding for future projects? So, you know, they're at 37% funded. The recommendation is to increase their budgeted reserve contributions. When you break this down on a per unit basis, it's an $11.90 average unit, you know, increase of the monthly contribution. So it's actually quite manageable. Even though that they're at 37%, there's no recommended special assessment. And I'll point out exactly why, you know, even though they're getting some warning signs, this is actually a very manageable situation, and it's a great opportunity for the board to take, you know, the appropriate steps and avoid a lot of trouble. So when we are plugging in your numbers, when we build the component list, the very first thing we do is we try your current reserve contributions. We don't want to increase your dues. That may be the opinion out there. We have no connections with financial institutions whatsoever. I wish I can deliver only good news and even recommend lowering your contributions. Of course, with you know, inflations and the realities of, you know, the greater world, you're always going to have to increase your contributions year to year in most situations. The question is how much. But if you look at their current reserve funding plan, and this includes 3% annual increases, it's simply not going to cut it. You know, this is very plain to us. So you can see how the recommended funding plan, you know, you really don't see the spread for a few years and then it takes off. And after 30 years, we're getting to 100% funded. But in the meantime, we're okay with a gradual buildup because this enables you to still complete your projects on schedule. And if you get to year 10, if the pool heater needs to be replaced, you have the funds available. It's just a matter of, okay, it's not about do we have the money, it's a question of is it really necessary now, or can it get more life. But you have to be ready, you have to have the funding first, and that's our goal with you. So that's a very important chart to find in your reserve study. Unfortunately, all reserve study companies have a different way of organizing it, but you will find this chart. So you want to then, if you want to take a deeper dive, let's look at annual expenses. And this is why your reserve contribution is so important. Not only is it one of the largest, if not the largest, line item on your annual budget, but you're trying to establish a good, steady reserve contribution rate that hopefully, you know, increases 3 to 5% per year, but it's very predictable. That can tackle all of the various wildly fluctuating costs year to year. And there's something lurking out here at this community that's really raising eyebrows, and this is driving this particular funding plan. But if the board commits to those and appropriate, the budgeted recommended contributions, they'll be able to tackle this project without a $1.7 million special assessment and without dramatically increasing the budget. The reserve contribution's been eyeballing this project for years. And so once you see the bigger picture, then you can now start to scrutinize the assumptions. And this is why getting the reserve study ahead of schedule is good, because you want to take a close look at your component list. This component list is from next year's point of view. So this is how the remaining useful lives are set up from the 2026 point of view, how old they'll be at that point. Identify the projects that have 0 remaining lives. That's a good first step. Be sure to review and make sure that nothing was missed. A lot of times reserve studies are no site visit updates. If you just approved a new project that's going to be completed in November and it wasn't reported to us, now's the time to let us know, and we can revise the reserve study and adjust the figures before your annual budget meeting. Review any projects that were recently completed, and they're not going to be highlighted because they have a full life, but going down this list, you want to make sure the assumptions are correct. And the big project at this community that was completed, it's a PUD, was their asphalt reconstruction. And this was completed in 2025. It was actually completed after we did the site inspection. So we only saw the old asphalt, but we were presented with the proposals. We calculated the starting reserve fund balance on this study and subtracted the $642,000 project cost from that. So that's already taken into account. A big source of confusion is, well, why is the remaining life 24? We just completed it a month ago. Again, this is from next year's point of view. So if you complete a project in 2025, the remaining life is going to be 1 year less. The remaining useful life is going to be 1 year less than its useful life. So,
John,
yes.
I'm gonna ask you about this because I'm looking at the component list and it looks like this association, if I'm doing my math correctly, is about 33, 34 years old, or 36. So what, how do you determine what items, what components get included on this list? And at what point do new components get added? So to help people at home understand this, I know when I would look at communities that were maybe built in the 1970s and there wasn't a plumbing replacement, or we're talking about structural components like their catwalks or their staircases, where we're finding that they're in need of substantial upgrades, structural upgrades, it's not mentioned on the reserve study at all. And then we have to go back and figure out why it wasn't mentioned, how to include it, how to incorporate it. So I know there's a reason behind it, but I think it's helpful for people to know that a lot of these types of components are not included, and to try and kind of educate people on how to identify those and get those included if it's warranted. So
A great question, and yes, this is a source of this is the greatest challenge, because I wish, it was as predictable as asphalt or a pool heater or roofs. Long-term infrastructure projects, usually beyond, a 30-year life. Sometimes under great conditions, it might have a 50 or 75-year overall life, such as plumbing, sewer, electrical, drainage systems. So when I first started over 20 years ago, my instructions were that we cannot add that to the reserve study because it doesn't fit National Reserve Study criteria. It didn't have a predictable useful life nor predictable costs. For example, plumbing, oftentimes at a property like a high rise or apartment building, it comes up sporadically in nature, and they have a variety of plumbing of different ages for that stack. This stack is original, we replace this one, and so forth. So there was that barrier, but then the reality of trying to manage a community is these are also very expensive projects when they come due. So in 2023, the reserve study standards nationally were updated. It does give a lot more latitude with predictability. with respect to being able to fund the projects from reserves, you'll note on this component list, we've added funding for common area, subgrade plumbing and gas lines. Gas lines is in response to California's SB 900. Again, this is a PUD, so you wouldn't naturally, think that plumbing applies, but outside of the homes and the lots, the distribution lines are often association responsibility. In order to really effectively add these to the reserve study, I would recommend getting, for larger communities especially, having an electrical and a plumbing assessment conducted. And one of the great things about the new reserve study guidelines is a reserve project doesn't have to be on the reserve study, does not have to be a physical project. It can be an evaluation or an assessment of the common areas. So a prime example are the balcony deck inspections. That's all it is engineering evaluation, but that's being added to reserve studies. It's been added the past few years. If you want to have plumbing evaluations, and once you can get the estimates, at least a better things become more clear, that will sharpen the reserve study assumptions. If we don't have any recent assessments, I recently worked with a high rise that has a long history of plumbing repairs. So one of the guidelines with the reserve study standards is to also look at the historical trends, the patterns. If they're spending $50 to $100,000 every few years on plumbing, then I'll set up that plumbing schedule really in a true, honest nature as a contingency. I can't guarantee that this infrastructure project is going to become a bigger thing, because it's important to know that your reserve specialist is only doing a visual inspection. We're not doing destructive testing, invasive testing, and that's where you want to involve your service companies. If you have a good plumbing company who's always taking a look at the high-rise plumbing infrastructure, please ask for their opinion. We'll welcome it. Any additional information you can provide, we will incorporate.
Yeah, there's actually a question that came through on the Q&A that I answered, but I thought it would be good to get your perspective as well. And that is that if there is a component with a zero useful remaining life, but it looks to be in good condition or has not been problematic, is the association or is the board negligent or liable if they don't replace it?
Only if it causes harm. It's kind of a legal question, but if it's harmless in nature, like lobby furniture, no one's going to get hurt by it. um Deferring that, or if the carpeting, that's why the 3-year inspections are important, because your reserve specialist should also take note that if something is aging better than expected, it's okay to extend that. So as long as no one is going to be harmed by it, then the board shouldn't worry about it. I had a question just this week about extending the elevator and fire alarm system project 5 years, because that would help them avoid a special assessment. And I told them I simply can't do that unless your elevator company and your fire alarm company provide opinions to support that. So that's an opportunity to extend lives. There are certain systems that are highly, advanced, that we should only be relying on experts on, like elevators and fire alarm systems. But if it's not important, and it's not going to hurt anybody, then you shouldn't worry about it.
I think in my response, I mentioned that, for example, if it's a roof, you probably want to get an inspection done by a professional and to receive the report, because I understand you all just use visual inspections and manufacturer's guidelines to determine the useful remaining life. But if, there seems to be some additional life to it, and you do have, or they do have a report from a specialist or a roofer, they can submit that to the reserve specialist to kind of work with you to extend the useful remaining life by a year or two or whatever that is.
Correct. Yeah, actually, another client this week in downtown LA, they recently did a major overhaul of their cooling towers, and their company reported that it'll get them an extra 15 years. And the project itself was over $100,000, but they want to avoid having to go through the whole thing of getting the cranes in downtown LA and putting in a new cooling tower on top of 40 floors. So it was a really wise investment, and their company, the company that completed the cooling tower project, provided the updated remaining lives. So that was a very, very valid extension and money well spent. So another thing that we often get on our end when board members review the reserve study for the first time is, what's a backflow device? We get a lot of, what is this? I didn't know we had that. So if you are having a site visit update, a full or with site, your report should have a thorough inventory appendix, hopefully a photographic one. And it's really helpful to refer to that so you can be like, oh, okay, I've seen that before. Um, it helps educate other members as well, especially if you have a lot of complicated mechanical, or you're doubting the assumption. Why did this project have a 0 remaining useful life, such as this pool deck recocking of the joints? Okay, yeah, fair enough. There's pretty obvious cracking and warping, and your photo inventory will also provide a lot of maintenance recommendations, reasoning or justifying why this project is useful and a good decision. So definitely take the time to look at your photo inventory. You can learn a lot on why we are including these projects. A lot of them are preventive in nature and can save you a lot of money. Basically it will save you money to spend the money. So that's the reasoning behind a lot of projects. So now that the component list is vetted, and you are, everything is accounted for, we didn't miss any projects, everything's making sense, then you can go and approach the funding plan, look at that with confidence, because the component list is absolutely the foundation of your reserve study. Everything else is gonna derive from the list of assumptions. So now we want to go deeper into the funding plan. So what's behind the assumptions? What are we looking at, especially the next 5 years? The more near term we're looking at, the more predictable it is. And you can see that, oh, yeah, this is a lot of expenses over the next 5 years. A lot of projects have very short useful lives, so they're going to repeat. Others have longer term, but they may be coming into view. So, over the next 5 years, this property has over $613,000 of scheduled reserve expenses. Again, the reserves were at 341,000. So you can see that, okay, we got some planning to do. This is important. If you want a bird's eye view, find the 30-year summary, and this is a great chart because you can get all the data, and if you want to scrutinize year by year expenses, go back to the other chart, but this is a great snapshot. Note your funding plan and its annual increases. We are ramping them up. At first, it is nearly a 24% increase, but again, that did come out to $11 a month per unit. So that's not terribly that's not dire. Followed by 10% increases and four and a half the rest of the way. We're gradually building up to 100% funded, actually 99.4, but good enough. In the meantime, we're okay short term with having relatively weak to fair reserves, because the near term is much more predictable. And as we mentioned before, they did just complete the biggest project on the list, which was the asphalt reconstruction. So that's pushed out.
Sorry, there's a couple of questions. One question is, what is the $1.7 million expense in 2050? But also, there's another question that came up a few times, which is, how do you project 30 years out with all this craziness with inflation. And what inflation rate do you typically use? Have you adjusted that for your reserve studies? So two questions.
Sure. So, so the 1.7 million is mostly the next asphalt project scheduled for 2050. So all your future expenses will have an inflation factor. And so the asphalt, along with other scheduled projects that fall in that year, make up this large expense. But in a community like this, where asphalt is by far the most significant project, it'll stick out all across the board on every chart and table. The asphalt is what you're seeing when you see a big spike or a big drop in your a future percent funded projection. The inflation, that's a very important question, and it's been much debated recently. We still use, even though inflation was much higher recently and it's coming down, and then there's talk of tariffs and so forth, we still use the historical 3% inflation assumption moving forward. Note that that kicks in 2027 and beyond. But behind the scenes, these past few years, we've had years where we automatically increased all costs across the board by 10% or more. Certain projects, certain components, for example, water heaters, pool heaters, elevator systems, they were showing us very large price spikes. So we went even higher to reflect what we are seeing with our clients. Our LA office completes around 1,500 reserve studies per year. So we track the actual project completion costs internally, and when we notice trends, we'll make adjustments. But uh, just know that leading into 2026, and especially the last couple of years, we did apply very dramatic increases to the cost. It was a 10% increase, and then the next year another 10% across the board. However, moving forward, even if there was a dramatic spike, we still maintained the 3% moving forward, because that 10% assumption, I we cannot predict inflation, of course. I would probably be working for the Fed or something if I could. We can only go with the best data that we have. The price increases will be baked into your current cost, and moving forward, we'll use that 3% average.
Thank you.
Yeah, and yeah, a very important question. Note, and as I mentioned, you're going to note your percent funded strength, future expenses. Something that's often overlooked on reserve studies, and it's big part of it's on us. I'm talking to my company about kind of bringing this to the forefront, is your estimated interest income over 30 years. This is based on a 2% after-tax return. Over 30 years, and this is the incentive to funding your reserves, especially we have a lot of bad news out there when anytime a percentage comes up, cost of this, but interest rates on reserves are much stronger than they've ever been, probably at a higher level than I've ever seen. With a modest, very achievable, realistic 2% return on the reserves, this community, I tallied it up earlier, has over almost $550,000 of interest income coming their way. So when we talk about affordability, and there's other pitfalls to not funding reserves, but missing out on the interest income over 30 years is a colossal mistake, because then you just have to either, increase contributions to offset that missed income, or special assess. So it's a real important factor. It helps, ease the burden, and make funding these projects much more affordable. Another important thing that you can see quite clearly is your future fully funded balance figures. And the fully funded balance is a big source of confusion, and I'm going to highlight how it's calculated and its importance. But note out here in the future, when they complete their next asphalt project out in 2050, The percent funded, or I'm sorry, the fully funded balance goes from 2.6 million all the way down to 1.1 million. The reason is that when you complete projects, especially major projects, you no longer need that the full value of that project sitting in reserves. You have a number of years to build up over that sum up again. For the asphalt, you have another 25 years to build it back up. So it's really important to understand the fully funded balance, because we are not asking owners to pay for a future expense. We are simply asking that they pay for that project's value month to month, year to year, for as long as they choose to live at the community. So the formula, if you really want to get into reserve studies, but the formula for calculating the fully funded balance is you take each individual project, you divide its age by its useful life, multiply it by its current cost, and then you'll tally all these up to get the grand total, and that's how we calculate percent funded. But this project, the pole lights they have a 25-year useful life. They're 23 years old, so 2 years remaining. So they're getting close to the finish line here. Here's the current project cost, 13,500. Ideally, they should have 12,420 saved. And that means you don't have to have all of the money, but the closer you get to the end of the useful life, the higher the fully funded balance is going to be. Now let's look at that asphalt project, because it is the mover and shaker of this community. It has a $642,000 price tag, but it was just completed. There's only 1 year of age in 2026. Its fully funded value is 25,683. So if this project was still not completed, we'd have to have the full project value here showing the 642,000. The cost would match its fully funded balance, but it's done. It's a fraction because it's a 25-year life. So we don't need all this factored into the 900,000. That asphalt right now, that asphalt only represents about 25, 26,000. So this, this is the pushback that you're going to get. I'm funding for a project 5 years from now. Why don't we just special assess when the time comes, or I'm not going to be living here when that project comes due. But we are paying as we go. We spread the costs equally over every life cycle. You accrue that interest income, and it makes the funding of these projects much more fair, first and foremost, because special assessments only punish current owners, no matter how short a time they lived at the community. And you get the benefits of interest income and preventing bigger projects that come as a result of years of neglect, and now you're talking structural. So if you really want to go another level, let's what are the most important projects. um, Look through your study, see if there is a significance chart, and this will really show you, how much each project really means, how much this is driving the funding plan, how much of a burden. It summarizes the project cost based on the useful life and the true cost per year. And a lot of times you'll find that it's not always the most expensive projects that are the most significant. For example, the tree trimming here, this is jumping out. You're seeing a lot of low numbers here, but the tree trimming is almost 5%, even though it's a very low number. If you move further up the component list, we have the entry gates, and they have a current replacement value of $97,000. But look at the significance. It's much lower than the $15,000 tree trimming. And that boils down to the useful life. The tree trimming is scheduled here every 3 years. This is a much more expensive project, but it's every 50 years. So that's not gonna have a big impact. You think $100,000 project is huge, but it's less than 2% of the overall significance. And so you want to go through your list, identify the top 3 or 5 most significant projects, and pay close attention to those moving forward. Because if you can master those, you're gonna really set yourself up for smooth sailing ahead. Now, this community, we oh, go ahead.
I have two questions for you.
Yes.
I apologize if I'm ruining your flow here, but one attendee asked if your interest income is after tax, or is your interest income after tax, and what is assumed tax rate? I would think it's okay to pay taxes from the reserves then. Thanks.
Correct. Yeah, it's after so the interest rate assumption on your reserve study is an after tax. So if you're getting if you're it's not the true amount. However, and I don't want to throw a curveball, it is a projection over the next 30 years, so you are allowed to deviate from your current interest rate assumption. You can go higher. We encourage clients to be realistic and conservative about it, um, but it is a 30-year projection, and you can use a higher rate. That's why we're not tied, we're not wedded to your current interest rate. We're also not bound by current inflation rates, so we didn't have to apply a 10% moving forward. If you can track your top 3 projects at this community, if you combine asphalt paving and ongoing sealing, that's about 28% of the significance. Metal fencing and gate repainting, again, because it's every 5 years, it comes up often, so that cost really jumps up in importance. That's about 10%, and back then that tree trimming was 5%. So, we're over 40% is tied to 3 projects alone. And if you can get negotiate better costs on your tree trimming, that's going to have a big impact on your future projections. If you can get really competitive rates on your ironwork repainting, that's going to go a long way. We get boards who fret over just 1 year of remaining life on a pool heater, and it's we really have we can't unless you just replace the heater. That's one thing, or we have a recommendation, but the filters and the heaters, they're so insignificant that it's not worth the time and energy unless it's simply inaccurate in the reserve study. If you replaced it, yes, let's update it. But to have a debate over 1 more year of life on that pool heater, just have it, base it on age and your vendor's recommendations. If it does fail next year, you have the funds ready to go. But this chart is really helpful. It'll help you guys uh, really see what's important and what's just, a distraction, like this pedestrian gate at 0.06% relevance. So let's take another look at, we got another 2026 update. The reason I brought this to the forefront is right away we're looking at the percent funded, 123.4%. So yes, they do exist. They are out there. But wait a second. Why? What? You recommended an increase? So going back to that fully funded balance, yes, they are in a good position. They are ahead of the pace. But for some reason, their monthly reserve contribution is not holding up. And, this is an uncomfortable situation, but it's important to tell the truth and give them a funding plan. This is a younger community. It was built in 2018. Perhaps last year's board saw this percent funded, said, "Oh, great, we're overfunded. We have if these projects all come due, we have more money than we need." So they slashed the reserve contribution. Of course, that's erroneous. As we showed with the prior report, the fully funded balance is not the total replacement value of all your projects if they're due today. It's only their current deterioration value based on their ages and costs. So what did I see with this community that led to this? Again, I looked at their current funding plan, and things are starting to creep, starting to slide, and then boom, there's a big drop off. And you guys can probably guess, I gave you guys a hint with the other community. This one is very similar in the San Fernando Valley, the asphalt. Also, being a newer community, it's usually pretty smooth sailing the first decade or two. Years 20 through 30, that's when you you have to face the biggest challenges and the biggest long-term challenges. So this asphalt project is lurking, and this is why the recommended funding plan was applied to get ahead of it, deal with it, just a little drop, but we're still in great shape, and move forward from there. So that's what we see all the time on our end, and it's always a delayed fuse, especially for newer communities, because it's easy at first, assuming it's built right. But a lot of times, if we're starting a journey, early on, the slightest little change in the course of your plan can have big impacts. So this is a really critical situation, because if you look at that 30-year chart, we're looking at almost $11 million in expenses in 2043. And we're currently at 3.5 million. So we're starting a little ahead. We got a head start, but that doesn't mean the race is over. The benefit is they're not trying to build up from 20% funded, because that would only increase the contributions, but we have to make some important decisions now. So we are recommending a sharp increase, even though they are in this great position, kind of tapering it off, more 10% increases followed by 5%, and eventually we flatline it at 0% funded. But we got to get ahead of this project, because this is going to make or break this community, and we can see it. We can predict it now, that they have to start funding the asphalt. If they can identify their big three significant projects now and really just even fund those, even that can probably pretty much get them set up for success moving forward. If we want to see the details, they're skeptical. Oh yeah, we got the streets for 8 million. It's going to be followed by more ceiling. Oh, but 20, 30 years out, we're in that decade now. We got street lights, 700,000. The utility pedestals, your electrical boxes throughout the common areas, monument signs. So, also the paver driveways, 700,000. So we have a lot of projects. If you start from day zero at age 25, that's a big year, oftentimes 25, 30 years out. So this is why we need to get ahead of it. We need to take action now. But the good news is, the overall, we're saying increase your contributions to $25,000 a month. That comes out to $50.30 per unit on average. This is a pretty modest reserve contribution. A lot of communities wish their reserve contribution was this low. So a lot of times it looks bad only because what is currently being allocated to reserves is so low and artificially low. So in this situation, it's a $12.12 per unit increase, but from there, it's very manageable. And this community in particular, if you want to talk about interest income, over the next 30 years, this is 3.8 million of interest income, just based on after-tax assumption of 2%. So again, everyone wants to make the cost of living as affordable as possible. A lot of your owners are retired on fixed incomes, missing out on the opportunity to bring in the bank as a bonus unit, who's going to pay more than any other unit every year. That's a big opportunity that should not be passed up. Um, and also having strong, healthy reserves. It has a lot of other benefits. In recent years, we had earthquake retrofit mandates, and communities that had strong reserves, they were able to obtain loans more easily at better rates than communities with weak reserves. Oftentimes, if you're going to obtain a loan, they're going to hold minimum balance of your reserves at their bank, which means you can't touch it for that amount of time until you pay off the loan. So if there's future mandates, if your community has to convert to or put in solar panels because California is saying so, or all electric appliances, and now we really got to revamp the electrical system, not because it's failing, but because it doesn't have enough capability because of this mandate, having strong reserves makes it much more easy to deal with those situations that are truly unpredictable in nature. Um, but these are very long-term consequences, and again, slight deviations, if you're changing the course, you can end up right where you need to be, or you can end up in the Bermuda Triangle after 25 years. So pay close attention to the reserve study recommendations. It's really important for you guys to meet with your reserve specialist for those 3-year site inspections. I usually only spend a half a day at each community, every 3 years. You guys are living there, 365. Many board members have years of experience. The details, the project history, and the current priorities and concerns, those are very important for the reserve study. It'll help us work together. We can also walk you through the funding plan, see what works best. Can we adjust it? Can we adjust the annual increases and spread out the cost? Do we have time for that? What are the limitations with your assessment increases? You can increase assessments by 20% or less without owner approval. Ideally, we want a funding plan that can fit into that framework, so we can keep control with the board. Once you receive that reserve study, you should feel free to reach out to your reserve specialist, ask questions, have a Zoom meeting if you want to, discuss it. I've had 4 Zoom meetings this week alone because it's budget season. But it goes a long way, because if you as board members can understand the reserve study, and you can justify it personally on your end and as a team, it'll make it much more easier for you guys to share it with the community and back the assumptions. If you obtain proposals throughout the year, even if you do not approve the project, share those with the reserve specialist. Make sure the costs in the reserve study are on par. Um, and start early, as I mentioned earlier, 6 months before your fiscal year. And ultimately, follow the recommendations. The reserve study only has value if it's listened to. That's, as basic as I can put it, but it's important because things can look nice and rosy, but what's coming up ahead, and what is the board, where are you leading us with your reserve funding, what you actually approved. And we are at 52 minutes. Oh my goodness. So I want to leave some time for Q&A.
Yes, I've peppered you with a lot of questions throughout. I answered some, but I'm just going to go back and take a look and see if there are others that I answered that I'm going to kind of throw your way as well. So I'm going to ask you. So Terrence asked, our newest reserve study draft has 3% inflation, 4% cost of living, with 3 $2 million special assessments over the next 3 years. Yet the board is gung-ho on multiple unnecessary projects. For example, 14 roof tear-offs and hot asphalt on 14 buildings, with only one roof having a small leak. This is solely because our 2026 draft calls for this every 20 years based on past expenses. No roof inspection was done and no construction expert was used. Why does Sean recommend doing this all at once, not the actual condition of the component, if he does? Thanks.
I can't give a specific recommendation. I hope that the board was relying on the opinion of their roofing company and experts. It is a good idea for the board to always investigate these important situations. And, yes, roofs are very critical. If you are overly optimistic, or you just are negligent, you can cause a lot more damage to the buildings that are totally preventable. So you don't want to invite structural damage by having leaky roofs and mold and all those other costs. But I can't say if the board is acting too aggressively with the project or not. But they should be relying on the opinions of their experts, and I hope that's what they did.
Perfect. Okay, our association has parks, trees, and landscaping with related irrigation that we maintain using operating funds, and this is a major item in our operating budget. Should those assets need to be included in our reserves? And if they are, what are in general the guidelines to follow?
So yeah, very good question. If you are an older community and you've been dealing with the landscaping and irrigation for years, and you are able to handle it from operating without major surprises year to year, then yes, I would recommend keeping it in operating because it's working and you have a track record of ongoing maintenance and upgrades. If the discussion is turning into more comprehensive landscape overhauls, if that's what the community is now interested in doing for either cosmetic or water saving purposes, or you've been given the heads up about non-functional turf and you got a bigger project coming in the near term, then it should be in reserves. With tree trimming, termites, landscaping, irrigation, as long as the operating budget can handle it and it's spread out in nature based on your historical precedents, that's fine. But be realistic about what that operating budget entails, because when the operating budget is not realistic and it's putting, flowery numbers in there, they're not. The next consequence is we have a budget shortfall, and look, we have all these reserves. Let's go borrow from it.
Mhm.
So
Perfect. Thank you. So Dill asks, how do you gather costs to produce a reserve study for a project?
so the site inspection is big, especially that full site inspection, because we are recording all of the square footages, the linear footage, and so the unit costs. How are we going to price the metal fence if we don't know how much it is, or how much square footage of asphalt? Further along in the process, if the community is completing projects, we'll look at the project costs, the proposals. If they switch to a different type of roof, then we'll also adjust the useful life assumptions moving forward. If they went from a asphalt gravel roof to a silicone roof, that's a different assumption moving forward. But we'll also use the cost as long as it's a full comprehensive project and not like a band-aid repair. If you can provide vendor input, if they're willing to share some rough estimates, that's always very helpful. And we'll definitely respect their opinions. And if none of those options are available and the project has many years on it, we're going to look at the 1,499 other clients that we have and see if any of them have completed the similar project recently, and base it on local cost factors.
Perfect. Okay, I think we answered that one live. um, what do you think of having threshold funding target of 75%?
It is a valid funding plan. The the incorrect assumption is if we aim for 75% funded after 30 years, or any point in the future, we automatically decrease the reserve contribution by 25%. And that's not true. Because it's so long term, it's a very small savings. And I'll show boards the spread. So if you want to see it, ask your reserve specialist. Hey, what's it look like? Oh, it's actually only a small amount of savings, and so a lot of times boards will actually be like, okay, that's not such a great idea after all. So let's just aim for 100%. But it is a valid, responsible funding plan. It's not our default, which is full funded 100%. But the funding plan that I hate and all reserve specialists should hate is baseline funding, which is the theoretical lowest amount of reserves you can put in to avoid a special assessment. It never works out. It never will. The last few years proves that with inflation and what's to come moving forward. So, but threshold funding, especially in a strong position, is okay.
Okay, great. And last question, keeping right on time, is association reserves factoring non-functional turf into 2026 studies?
if that's the recommendation of if it's been established that you have to go through this project. I just had a community in Northridge. They had the landscaping company had an assessment done, and it came back clean that they do not have to replace their landscaping. But yes, if you've been given notice that this qualifies for full replacement or modification, talk to your reserve specialist. I believe it's 2029 is the deadline. And so yeah, some communities do have to add it, unfortunately, which is another government mandate. And that's why having strong reserves, especially when you have things from left field that are out of everyone's control, such as, you know, government mandates, the stronger your reserves are, the easier you can absorb these surprises.
Okay, wonderful. Well, before we say goodbye for the day, I just wanted to let everybody know that we did record today's webinar. We will circulate this. So if you wanted to refresh yourselves with this information or share this with fellow board members or people that you know, we're happy to circulate this. We also have our annual educational event, HOA organizers. It's the ABCs of HOAs that's coming up on December 6th, and we're going to be in person this year. So if you want more information about that and to register, please reach out to us. You can email me directly at info@hoaorganizers.com. But that will be held in Los Angeles County. And I wanted to sincerely thank you, Sean. I know you're in the thick of budget season, so we really appreciate the time before today to meet with us and prepare for this, and also your time today to be here and share and educate our board members here. So thank you, thank you, thank you. We really appreciate you. And thank you to everybody who is here today and gave us your attention. We really love empowering our board members through education and making you stronger at what you do and better equipped to serve as your board of directors. So we are here for you. We're here as your resources. And we'll circulate my contact information and Sean's in the chat so you can also reach out. And yes, Matt, put in the chat, you can go to hoaorganizers.com to register for future events, but I will put that in the chat for, actually, Matt, would you mind putting Sean and my email addresses in the chat box as well for everybody who's on with us? And then we will say goodbye. So let me actually see, there's two more questions, I guess. Oh, thank you very much. Two thank yous. So not questions, but thank you. We appreciate it. So there is my email address in the chat, and Sean's is right there, skargari@reservestudy.com. All right, enjoy the rest of your week. And Sean, any final words?
Just you know, oh geez, I'm fumbling this. Just to really take a close look at those reserve studies and ask the tough questions. Feel free to reach out.
Perfect. Thank you again.
Thank you guys.
Have a good one. Bye.